Welcome to our webinar, How to Teach Upper Secondary Cross-Curricular Cambridge Global English. I'm Tamsin Hart from Cambridge University Press and Assessment, and I'll be hosting this webinar for our speakers Jen Law and Bridget McHugh. Thank you for joining us today. Let me now hand over to Jen.
Thank you very much, Tamsin, and yes, welcome to everybody. So here's just a brief outline of what we're going to cover today. So I'm going to give some tips for teaching with the series of Cambridge Global English 10 to 12, as well as some general tips, which I hope that you can take forward into your teaching environment. We're also going to talk about academic skills and academic English across the curriculum, which I think is very valuable, particularly for students who are transitioning into higher education. We're going to do a little bit about 21st century skills, or sometimes these days we call them life skills or life competencies, and then move on to this concept of progression between qualifications. Then I'm going to hand over to my colleague who will talk to you about how to choose from an array of Cambridge English resources, how they're mapped to the CEFR, and how they're supporting qualifications and examinations. That'll be Bridget, will take over from me later on in the session. So let's just start with a very brief introduction. So on screen, you can see three images of our lovely new Cambridge Global English 10 to 12 course books. They're packed full of all sorts of exciting things, and we're going to talk about a few of those during this session. But I'll leave it until the end for my colleague Bridget to talk to you more about the other resources that support the course book too. We have lots of exciting things online that you might want to have a look at. So let's just begin with a few tips, shall we? And here I'm going to, in this section, just talk a little bit about tips relating to the coursebook and workbook integration. I'm going to talk about teacher resources, both generally and obviously what we're offering through the Cambridge Global English series. Some key features, and one of my absolute key passions is learner empowerment. How can we empower our learners to take charge of their learning? And finally, in this section, I'm just going to touch on this concept that every learner's needs to be taken into account every time we step into our classrooms. So here we go with my first tip. So I believe that we should embrace the word more. Remember that students need opportunities to try things, do things more than once. They need additional practice. It helps them to deepen understanding. More exposure to linguistic elements move things from short-term to long-term memory. We know this because all the research that goes into cognition tells us this. Repeated exposure to a wide variety of text types also broadens learners' reading repertoires. We want them to do more reading. More opportunities to read encourage learners to be active and engaged readers. So in this series in Cambridge Global English 10 to 12, we have definitely embraced the word more. The course books provide all the ingredients, rather like a cake, I think. And then the workbook comes along and it builds on that. So the course book will give you all the information and interests and needs that you have if you're going to be developing your listening skills, for example. And in the course of doing that, the workbook has additional opportunities. It has more opportunities to interact with the language that's presented in the course book, more opportunities to read similar text types, similar genres of text. So the two really work together. And I like to think of the workbook as being the icing on the course book cake. So together they make a really lovely, yummy exposure to lots of aspects of language learning. Now, here's a question for you very briefly. Could I ask you, what does the word success or the phrase success criteria mean to you? If I say success criteria, what does that mean to you? Can you put that in the chat box for me? Success criteria. Any ideas? That have a bit of a slow text today, a bit of a slow chat box. Yes, what does success criteria mean to you? Oh, good. The objective we want to meet by the end of our course time. Very nice. Thank you very much. Yeah, I think that's a good one. A main idea to be understood. Yes, absolutely. Anybody else want to put something in there? A little bit slow, I think, today. There's a lag time. Okay, well, I'll pick up from where the rubrics to meet our objectives. Oh, yes, it's all coming through. How successfully you understand any topic. Lots of lovely things. Okay, I like the word that some people are using, the word success again. And I have another tip here. I really feel that we should embrace the word success because it exudes positivity. And we want to set the learners up for success. We don't want them to just tick off a learning objective. We want to foreground and celebrate our learners' achievement. Now, teachers' resources are always a great starting point. They usually contain lots of ideas and guidance on how to set your learners up for success. And for that reason, I would always suggest that your first go-to when you're planning a lesson should be your teacher resource. Now, what mentor once told me that a well-planned lesson will run itself. And speaking for myself, time and experience have proved her right. So teacher resources are great because they help set us up for success as well as our students. Now, the Cambridge English Teacher Resources course, like all others, is there to support you too in setting up your learners. And if you look on screen here, I'll just use my little zoom, you can see that we use this idea of success criteria as opposed to calling them learning outcomes. So we build that word in early on. And then you can see on screen, I've just taken a couple of examples out here, but every time that you're going to set up a lesson, there are lots of starter ideas, for example, things that you could do with the digital classroom variety of materials. So lots of things to support you there. And finally, if I can just zoom in here on my screen. Let me see. Oh, okay, there's our digital. Let's move along. Okay, and also lots of interesting things like downloads of the audio transcript. And I'd just like to point on here that you can see the cross-curricular link. And as we talked, the title of this session, I think, pointed out, these books, this series, is really taking into account that students at the later end of their learning, particularly if they're in an English medium learning environment, maybe where they're learning other subjects in English, then we're trying to embed lots of things that relate to those other topic areas too. So it's a really rich teacher resource that gives you lots of information about how you can set up you and your learners for success. Okay, so here comes another tip. So creating a learning environment where students are empowered to take equal responsibility for learning, I think, is really key. We want to give learners a voice. We want to include them in decision making. We can use things like assessment for learning strategies, where they acknowledge what they can do already, where they think about where they want to go next, and how they think they're going to get there. So there's a real partnership going on here, but we want the focus to be on the learners themselves. We want them to feel like, you know, we're speaking to them in a partnership. Okay, so I'm going to put some bubbles up on the screen, and I'm going to ask you in a moment, have a little look. I've just pulled these out of this book that you can see in front of you, this page. These are front matter pages from the beginning of the course book, okay? And I'd like you just to have a quick read of the bubbles I'm showing you. They're just enlarged from what is on the page itself. Okay. Okay, so can you see any words that occur on all of the bubbles? There should be, I hope, some standout words that you can see in the bubbles. What can you see that is the same on all the bubbles? Either one word or two words that are similar. Samina, yes. You and you're on fire, Samina. Okay, yes, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so the books talk to the learner. So the books Yes, lots of people are saying you, fantastic. The books address the learner. We're trying to create a personal relationship between the materials, the learner, and of course you as the teachers, because we want to give the students agency. It puts the focus on the learners and it foregrounds the learner-centered approach. So here's something you might do if you are new to the books and you're going to use these books with your students. Before the learners start using the book, you could set up an activity for them to explore these pages. And then you could perhaps ask them to set a challenge, for example, say, okay, I would like you to look through pages 10 to 15, and how many times can you see the word you or your? And then afterwards, you can have a discussion about why does the instructional language, if you like, in the book, use you and your, so that we can begin to talk to them about putting them front of center, giving them a voice, and understanding that there's a relationship between you and the books and them. So everyone's working together, but the students are the central focus. Okay, thank you for all those who mentioned you and your in the chat box. Okay, next. So every person, every student, I think, is unique. So every student has individual abilities, individual needs. We all know how important it is to ensure that we carry each student forward on their learning journey. So my next tip would be to get good at differentiation. Okay, think about how you can set up all your learners for success. So some might need additional support and some might need additional challenges so they can all reach their full potential at that moment in time. Okay, and Cambridge Global English has built in lots of support to help you provide for your individual learners' needs. Okay, so the first thing I put up on screen here, which I just wanted to show you, was this idea of common misconceptions, because when we get to know our students very well, we sometimes then are able to home in on the things they might find a little bit more challenging or misunderstand. So we put this into the book so that you can think about that in advance, so that you can meet all the students' needs and make sure that nobody has any misconceptions. And then you can see at the bottom of the slide here, I've highlighted in pink. Maybe again, if it's difficult for you to see, I can enlarge that. We mentioned these differentiated worksheets as well. So again, Bridget will mention supporting materials at the end, but online there are these great worksheets which allow you to take into account your students' needs, and you can set them up before a lesson to support them before they come into the main learning environment. And again, if I just have a click on that, here we go. And you can also see here that all the time, all the way through the resources, you're getting ideas and suggestions of how you can set up students, support them where they might need it with, say, challenging vocabulary, and also challenging those students who maybe are racing ahead a little bit to start building even more vocabulary into their lexicon as well. Okay, so one more thing. So try using critical inquiry questions to start off a lesson. And by that, I mean WH questions are a great way to fire up your students' little grey cells. There was an English author called Agatha Christie many years ago who wrote a story with a detective called Hercule Poirot, and used to talk about firing up your little grey cells, getting the connections in the brain going and getting ourselves engaged. And I think this is really important at the start of every lesson or every unit to begin to activate our students' schemata, to get them interested and engaged and want to know more. And we have embraced this idea in this series. So each unit starts with a quotation. We hope a very interesting quotation that sparks their interest, and also some inquiry questions or a single question. So I'd like you to have a look at this picture here and see, just give you a moment or two to have a look at it, read the quotation and answer my question. Or my questions, I should say. So feel free to tell me anything you think you can see in the picture. A mountain range. Wow, that's a good one. I like that. I haven't thought of that one before. Anyone else? What can you see? A burning forest, a sunrise in the mountain. Lovely. How does it make you feel? How does the painting make you feel? Oh, that looks like a finger painting. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. How does it make you feel? Another burning forest. Ooh. Oh, so Minish says it makes her feel like it's healing her soul. What a beautiful thought. Okay. Global warming, burning of forests, plastic discarded. Oh my words. And someone a bit scared. Someone feels energized. So lots of different feelings and emotions that the picture is also making people feel. So really interesting. Someone's thinking about rising temperatures. Okay, excellent. I'm going to stop you there because we're obviously we have a limit on our time today. But can you see just a single image immediately gets us thinking about all sorts of different things and get very energized, don't we? And I'd like to just pick up on this point here that with lots of different skills that we bring to bear in the world today that we need to be able to use in this great, wonderful world that we live in. And there's one skill we've used at the moment. I just wonder what you think it is. Can anybody think of a life skill you've just used? What sort of a life skill have you just used now? The sort of skill that you use in your life outside the classroom? Any ideas? Oh, visual, yeah. So we've been looking at a very visual skill. Yes. Thank you, Afifa. Imagery, yes, we're thinking about visuals and imagery. Critical thinking, honey, yay! Okay, yes, critical thinking, absolutely, because we're questioning and we're inquiring. Brilliant. Okay, so honey is the champion here, but we are all coming up with some fantastic ideas. So thank you for that. And we're going to touch on this idea of life skills a little bit later on in the session. So I'm going to move on now to talk about academic English, or sometimes it's referred to as AE, across curriculums. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look a little bit at academic language itself, and then I'm going to talk about how that relates to, or how academic English relates to reading and writing, and then we'll finish off with speaking skills for academic context as well. I think it's always useful to make a distinction between general academic language and subject-specific language. So general academic language relates to things like strategies, so avoiding repetition, signposting our opinions and views, fixed expressions, things like the aim of, or in summary, that sort of thing. So general English can be used in lots of different academic contexts, okay? Subject-specific academic language is what it says on the tin. So terminology to talk about that subject that you're engaged in then. All right, so I think it's good to make that distinction so that when you're building your students' ability to function in an academic environment, that you're thinking about what do they need for all academic environments and what do they need for that particular context that they're in, for example, the sciences. And we have done this for you in Global English. And again, we'll have a quick look on the screen. So here's an example from level 11. And you can see that in the orange box, the academic language box, the title is Human Geography. So these are some words and phrases that students might need to use if they're talking about human geography. All right. And some of these phrases, they are very recognizable as phrases, which is why they're there as phrases, as opposed to standalone words. And then here we've got another one. Here's another academic language box. Now this one, as you can see, I hope from the title, Paraphrasing and Using Synonyms, is a much more general academic language. And this language can be carried forward into different situations. And finally, we have another general academic language box, but this is a little different because in this case, it's talking about argumentative essays or argument essays. And you can see some terminology there, some specific terminology like claim, counter-argument, and rebuttal. Now, this language, in fact, can also move into another arena, for example, if the students are debating or if they're having a discussion. So again, where people need to rebut an opinion, to disagree with a claim, they need this language, if you like, to be able to understand what they're doing. Okay, so let us move on. Now on the screen now, you can see some lovely pictures. Now, something I think we all are aware of is the differing interests of the students in our classes. So some may be very techie, some may be very into the arts, others are maybe very science driven in terms of their own personal interests. And I suspect some may be very into their mobile phones as well. Okay. But as teachers, it's important to try and provide a variety of topics to introduce language and develop language skills. And we need to appeal to those different likes, dislikes, and interests, or lack of, in students in front of us. So no more so, I think, in this cross-curricular context. If you work in an environment, for example, where English is the medium for instruction in science and biology, in history and so forth, then we need to make sure that we give students the language they need for that. And we've tried to help out here, if you like, by choosing topics in the series that would help students to familiarise themselves with lots of different types of language for different academic contexts. And also things that will pique their interest. So this particular unit is all about the wonder of tiny things, okay? And in this lesson, you can see, and I'm just going to show some pictures. We've got here, this tiny creature is a pygmy possum, and you can see how small it is by the size of the hand that it's sitting on, all right? And then we've got this little creature here, which is a tiny hummingbird. Look at the size, that is absolutely tiny. Okay, and then we've got, what's my other one? Oh, I love this one. This is a tiny seahorse that lives in the sea, and it's no bigger than the end of my thumb. Imagine that, something so tiny living in the oceans. So we have tried to pick out subjects that we hope will pique interest, but also have a real cross-curricular implication as well. Okay. Right. Okay, so developing learners' academic writing skills is, I think we need to say, an incremental process. So we can come at writing development from a couple of different directions. So either we can go down that we can use what's called product writing, and this is where learners examine and identify specific features, the building blocks, if you like, that relate to specific text types. Right. So, for example, if you had a report, how would it look different to something like an essay? So there are certain building blocks that we need to see that relate to that type of academic writing. And then we have also, we need to think about another approach, which is process writing. And that's where we walk students through the process from planning, preparing, writing, editing or redrafting, and then reflecting afterwards on the process. So these two things are really important, I think, to develop effective academic writers, particularly as they move through from their sort of lower secondary into upper secondary and moving on towards tertiary education, where it becomes a lot more academic. And Global English, Cambridge Global English, sorry, 10 to 12, uses both approaches and builds and expands learners' knowledge and skills across the 3 levels. And I've just used this diagram, if you like, to help us think about that. So, for example, in level 10, it contains a mixture of text types. And I want to say text types, these are the texts that the students will be producing. Some are less academic, like blogs, for example, and some are moving much more towards academic, like reports. Whereas in level 11, we are then starting to widen and broaden the different sorts of text types they might meet. So they will be working on reports and proposals and essays. Okay, and then when we move into level 12, this is really the last stage before they might go on to tertiary or vocational education. Then we're broadening out things like essay types themselves. And so moving into agree and disagree, opinion, for and against, all those different types of essays that students may need to be able to produce in their academic environments. But the key thing here is I talked, did I not, about product and process. So to really help with the product approach and with the analysis in terms of what students can see within text, each time we have what we call a model text. So students will be able to see one and examine it, explore it, look for commonalities within that text that they need to be able to reproduce themselves. And then lots of staging, the process, the staging, to walk them through it when they come to do it for themselves. So you can see that we're bringing those data analysis and production together through those two different approaches. And let's not forget speaking. You've probably gathered here I am today and I love speaking, but actually speaking is used in different contexts in our life. It's with our friends and our family, but also in academic situations and learning situations and business and work situations. My co-writer Laura reminded our listeners actually during a recent podcast of the importance of addressing academic speaking skills, because often there's a real focus on the writing and we forget about the speaking. Students in tertiary education may need to give presentations, they may need to take part in discussions. In fact, they might even be taking part in debates. And some of those students may be less confident speakers. So it's essential we support them in building the confidence and getting them ready for the next stage of their education journey. But also we want them to feel, again, set them up for success, to feel, comfortable, to be able to enjoy the experience of sharing the knowledge of other people too. So we are also seeing if we can do this for you in our series. And first of all, I'm just going to put you can see on screen an excerpt from one of our course books. And I'd just like you to have a look at it and think, do you think this would be level 10, level 11, or level 12? Okay, have a look at the speaking tips and the communication tips. What sort of level is that coming in at, do you think? Is it 10, 11, or 12? Okay, Rajesh, that's 10. Okay. And Samina says 11. Okay. Anyone else want to try? Not sure. Oh, yeah, lots of 11s. Someone says 9. Okay. Well, today we're only going to talk about 10 to 11, 10 to 12. So it has to be one of those three. Okay. Okay. Oh, another one for 10. Okay. Yeah, this has actually come out of the level 10 book. Now, everything in here is obviously applicable as you move forward, but the language is not too complex, but we are giving them some good tips of how they can react to what others say in a discursive situation. All right, if we look at the next one, they're not necessarily in order. Have a look at this one. Let's go and zoom in a bit for you. Okay, what about this one? Engaging the audience. What do we think? 10, 11, or 12? Oh, Rajesh is saying 11. Yeah, another 11. Is it Deepak Priya? Esme says 11, Sarah says 11. Well done, guys, absolutely right, it's 11. Now, we are still not overly complex, but we are beginning to think about capturing listeners' attention in all descriptions as well. So we're starting to build more sort of skills, if you like, into audience engagement, as opposed to purely in the discussion field. And then finally, the last one, here we go. Let's get that one up on the screen. Oh, let's take one first. Okay, here's the last one. What do you think about this one? 10, 11 or 12? Oh, 12, well done, excellent, okay. Perfect. And the reason it's 12 is, again, we're becoming a little more complex now. We're talking about conceding a point. And that is, well done, Mohammed. Yeah, that's again, we need a slightly higher level of linguistic ability, if you like, sometimes to be able to express those ideas. But not only that, we have to think about age and stage of learning as well. So as the students as their own learning needs increase, then we have to also increase the linguistic input as well. Great. So moving forward, 21st century skills. So I'm just going to talk briefly about this idea of the classroom and the outside world. And then I'm going to come to critical thinking again and some collaborative practice. So as we all know, the whole premise of going to school is to prepare for life in the world outside, isn't it? So although looking back on my own education, I have to say, I'm not sure my teachers were taking that approach, really. I remember doing a lot of, in my French learning, just declining verbs and saying, je suis, tu es, il est, elle est. Well, when I went to France, I couldn't actually communicate. So, you know, we need to make that definite, distinct connection between what we're doing in the classroom and the outside world. And I think we need to keep that connection in mind at all times. So why am I teaching this? You know, how will this help my students negotiate the world outside? When will they use this knowledge or skill? So we need to have that in mind when we do that. And we've built this link between the classroom and the outside world very much into this series of books. And we put in some good 21st century or life skills highlights, if you like, that we can concentrate on when we are with our students. Now, I've got a quick challenge for you, and we don't have a lot of time, but let's have a go. Here's a box here. If you think about all the skills that you use in life, what life skill do you think this might be, taking turns during a discussion? What sort of life skill is that? Any ideas in the chat box before I do the big reveal? What kind of life skill? Okay, so any idea what we might be doing? Is it to do with that critical thinking? Was it, oh, communication skills, Naz? Oh, okay. Should we see if Naz is right? Let's have a look. Well done, you got it. Excellent. One more challenge. Here we go. What about this one here? What sort of life skill might that be? Rajesh said workplace communication. Well done. Yeah. This one, what about understanding global issues and its effects? Any ideas? Someone's got problem solving, listening and speaking skills. Futuristic thinking, I like that one, honey. Should we have a look? Let's do a big reveal, shall we? This is social responsibility, okay? Now, but you're all right, all those words you're using are all aspects of life skills as well. So really just wanted to use this opportunity to let you know that throughout the book, you'll find lots of support in the students developing those real skills for life outside alongside their language as well. And remember the critical inquiry questions I mentioned a bit earlier. We learned about how people learn. We know how important it is to give learners agency, to get them actively engaged in their learning, don't we? We need to nurture critical thinking skills to develop curiosity, a desire to know why, the how and the what. So during the development phase of the books, the field research came back and told us that teachers really wanted a strong focus on critical thinking skills too. And we've done just that. And so you will see as you go through the book that its critical skills is one of the 21st century life skills, and it has its own pink boxes too. Okay, so that is highlighted throughout. And finally, there's an old adage that two heads are better than one, meaning that working together reaps benefits. And together we, and the same goes for our students, can learn from each other. We can support each other, encourage each other, and celebrate our successes. So students are encouraged throughout their Cambridge Global English journey of 10 to 12 to work together and support each other and to facilitate some real group collaboration. We've included a wide range of project ideas at the end of each unit. You'll also find that the projects tap into lots of different life skills like communication, creativity, awareness of diversity, and so forth and so forth. Okay. The other thing that we've done with the project challenges in 10 to 12, and particularly at the top end of 11 and 12, is to start giving students responsibility within the group, different roles to play to encourage those responsible attitudes as well in collaborative situations. Okay, so we have a couple of things to finish off with. So smooth progression between qualifications, and what can we talk about there? Just going to touch on some common factors, and then this idea of incremental development, and something called practice and prepare. And I've just got time to pose a very quick question with you. So when you think about any English language exam, what would you expect it to test? So any assessment, doesn't matter who it is, what exam board it is, but what would you expect the assessment to test or to assess in English language learning? Reading comprehension, yes. The 4 skills, yes. Yes. Proficiency, yes. Reading comprehension, yep. Yep. Learning, speaking, listening, speaking, reading, writing. Okay, all the 4 skills, yep. And grammar, vocabulary, application, writing, excellent. Okay, so there's a real commonality, I think. There are a lot of common factors when it comes to assessment. And I'm a great believer in taking the fear out of assessment. So a valid exam or test should enable learners to demonstrate they have the knowledge and skills to function in the outside world, in higher education, at work, and in the social sphere. So if learners develop these skills during their learning journey, they shouldn't find any surprises whatever assessment they encounter. All right, so that's why I think it's important to think about common factors. And we've tried to adopt this approach in this series again, and we've done incrementally. So we've started with in 10, we are starting to build in some of the skills that we know, well, the life skills that they're going to use outside, everything they need, if you like, to function in the world outside, to function in higher education. We've built all that in, and then we've also supported it with various assessment vehicles too. We really encourage assessment for learning so that students begin to feel comfortable about assessing themselves and have less concern about being assessed by someone else as well. This goes all the way from 10, 11 to 12. And we've been a bit sneaky, to use an English word, because each unit finished with the practice and prepare section. Now, all the exam tips and activity types are on the face of it quite universal. So if I just pop these up on screen and I can zoom in, if you'll see these exam tip boxes, and they occur throughout the series, and all of those tips are quite universal. You could use them in pretty much any assessment you take. Okay, but we've done something more. So in the first one, which you can see on screen here, so let me just use my little laser pen like laser. So this is from 10, and we have also embedded some activity types that relate to Cambridge IGCSE. Okay. And when it comes to the next one, where's my little laser? Here we go. This is 11, and 11 has embedded activity types that relate to Cambridge B2 first, moving towards Cambridge C1 advanced, and also IELTS. So we put some of those activity types in. And finally, with level 12, we've embedded activity types that relate to Cambridge C1 advanced and IELTS as well. So hey presto, without knowing it, students are already being immersed in some of the general things they need to know, and also some of the assessments which they may possibly be going on to take as well. Okay, so finally, some words that I think really encapsulate the richness of Cambridge Global English 10 to 12. They're very student-centered. Remember, I talked about that word "you" and "your" at the beginning. So the whole of the premise of these lovely course books is to really put the students front and centre. It's good to empower our students. It's good to give them agency in their learning, and we have, I think, given that opportunity in our books. They're very incremental. They're building students' needs in terms of skills, knowledge, the attitude towards learning incrementally between the levels. They're engaging. We've thought about ways to get the students into the topics, into the language, by those lovely critical questions at the beginning, for example. And they're very holistic, so they take this whole rounded view of a student's needs when it comes to joining higher education or moving into the world outside. That's it from me. I'd now like to hand over to my colleague Bridget to continue. Bridget, welcome.
Hi, thank you very much, Jen, for that excellent presentation. Some such useful tips for teaching all the 4 skills. But yes, just wanted to kind of talk to you a little bit about, again, why we're here today. It's exciting that we've got our Cambridge Global English series that stretches from, or used to stretch from 1 to stage 9, but now we have added on stage 10, 11 and 12. If you just click next, Jen, yes, there they are, to really complete this pathway for schools and their Cambridge Global English journey. So if you go to the next slide, Jen, I think you can see that, and I've seen some questions in the chat about this as well, we've really tried to give a smooth progression through the stages. So this is how Global English, the arrows represent each Global English stage. So at the blue arrow at the bottom, that's Global English stage 1 that links to A1 on the CEFR scale. And then these arrows go up. So you'll be able to see in the green arrow, that's Global English stage 8. It's quite small, but that links to B1 plus. And then by the time we get to stage 10, the orange arrow, you can see that our Global English stage 10 links to B2 on the CEFR scale, with stage 11 linking to B2 plus and stage 12 linking to B2 plus / C1. So this is how we've kind of really completed the Global English journey, and how you can see the CEFR scale transitions upwards from our stage 1 right the way through to our stage 12. And then on the next slide, Jen, thank you. Thank you very much. So yes, as Jen mentioned, we have a number of components, not just the course book and the teacher resource and the workbook, which Jen spoke about in really interesting detail. So to give a bit of an overview, we have the course book with digital access, and you can also purchase the digital course book as a standalone as well. And then we've got the workbook with digital access, this teacher resource with digital access, so that's available with print and digital bundle as well. And that includes some of the resources that Jen was speaking about, like the differentiated worksheets. It also includes downloadable tests linking to the qualifications at each stage, which I'll show on the next slide. But then we also have the digital classroom element too. So if you're familiar with Global English stage 1 to 9, it's quite similar with these videos and interactive grammar activities to really bring this kind of engaging feel to our topics within Global English. On the next slide, if we just go, thanks, Jen. So I can see there's been some questions in the chat as well about this, so the framework links. And the Global English 10 to 12 does support various outcomes, as Jen was kind of speaking about in her last few slides as well. So stage 10 covers Cambridge IGCSE English as second language, and some of our stage 9 does some ESL, IGCSE ESL task types as well. So kind of 9 and 10 together cover the Cambridge IGCSE English as second language, but it has not been through the Cambridge International Endorsement process, unlike some of our other series like Peter Luke and Tony IGCSE ESL. And then stage 11 bridges upwards from Cambridge IGCSE ESL and provides this link towards kind of further study and academic study and equipping students with these skills that they might need to go on to have success at university. So we've got IELTS academic reading and writing task types and IELTS listening and speaking task types in stage 11 and 12. And some Cambridge English qualification links as well. So with B2 first and C1 advanced. So we're really trying to prepare students, because we know from Cambridge International, there's no kind of ESL qualification as such at A level, but we want to really help students to continue their ESL journey above and beyond IGCSE ESL and kind of map upwards to really support them with success in other subjects, developing these academic skills, but also, yeah, some task types, preparing them for exams that they might encounter to have success in later life. So yes, just the next slide, Jen, from me. And yeah, I had a few questions in the chat about this as well. So we do have a lot of series for English at IGCSE level, and it can be a bit confusing which one is right for your schools. And we've thought about this, and we know we want to give you choice and make sure you've got the right series for your school setting. And I can see in the chat there's been some questions as well about the IGCSE English as an additional language compared to the IGCSE English as a second language. So we've kind of mapped out here in this chart that you'll see in our catalogue as well, and I think Tamsin will send some links to this as well. A bit of a decision tree, so you can see which CEFR level each series is. You can see which skills it practices. And we also have a YouTube video playlist as well, where Mia and some of my colleagues are talking through each of the different series. So English as an additional language, English as a second language, and some Cambridge Global English, and the kind of key things that the series supports, so you know which one is right for your school. But essentially, with the question about English as an additional language compared to English as a second language, the CEFR level for English as an additional language as a series is quite a lot lower. It's really focusing on everyday communication and initial practical languages skills, and is more at A2 level to B1, whereas English as a second language, which is a qualification which Global English supports, which the Luke and Tony series supports, and which Success International supports. This is a slightly higher level on the CEFR scale, so B2, but it also supports more kind of more sophisticated reading and writing skills here. It assesses reading and writing in the same paper, and speaking can be separately endorsed. So there's quite a few differences, but I think if I were you, I'd do a little bit more reading about it as well. Look at our catalogue and some of the Cambridge International website too. And oh yes, I can see in the chat that some of these links have been posted. So thank you very much for that, Margarita.
Thank you so much, Jen and Bridget, for that fantastic presentation. It's very much appreciated. Good luck with your teaching, and goodbye.